Which leads me to my next point. Before you go and do all of that, understand your pain points before you dive into this type of second brain system. Look at the types of data that you're going to be storing and categorizing. Where does it live? How do you save it now? How do you retrieve it now? What do you need it to do for you? And I think a lot of this comes down to if you are taking a lot of digital notes, doing a lot of research, then yes, this can be a great way to do it. Hi, I'm Chris LeBrun, your host of the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. As someone who's never been afraid of dreaming big and going for it all, I often find myself with a lot on my plate. I'm a husband and father, a nonprofit fundraiser, and an entrepreneur. What I've realized is my view of productivity was pretty toxic. After decades of believing that in order to do more, you had to work harder, I began to see productivity as this beautiful thing. Holistic productivity is the idea that you can accomplish your professional, personal, and purpose-driven goals in a healthy way, and doing so will make you happier and more fulfilled. Join me each week as we break down myths about productivity, share practical tips for maximizing your time, energy, and focus, and hear from others about their productivity journey. This is the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode number 28 of the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Glad that you are here for this episode, that you are investing in your productivity, but more importantly, in your goals and in your future. Before we start the episode today, I have an invitation for you. I could have done this as one of those commercial bits that get inserted into the audio version of the podcast, but I want this to be a personal invitation from me to you. Whether this is your first time listening to the podcast or you are a regular, I want to invite you to join the Holistic Productivity community on Skool. That's Skool. Skool is a platform for creators and entrepreneurs to bring people together. I recently launched the Holistic Productivity community, but already we have a growing community from literally around the world. And what I love is that it provides two-way communication. This podcast is one direction, me talking to you. And while I don't mind talking, as you could probably tell, I love hearing from you as well. And that just doesn't happen as easily on the podcast as it can on a platform like Skool. There are paid groups on Skool, but Holistic Productivity is free. And it is the only way that you can access different features like our monthly think tank conversation, where we all come together to talk about issues and opportunities that are facing us as employees, as entrepreneurs, and just everyday people trying to live life. There's a lot of other great resources and great conversation and community with more to come, and I want you to be a part of it. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes for the community on Skool. Again, absolutely free. Come join us, have a good time, and hopefully we can learn from each other. I hope to see you in Skool. So now for today's episode, this is for my fellow Gen Xers. Gen X is obviously, clearly the best generation. That'll start some conversation, won't it? But we do have a big challenge that I don't think any other generation has really had. And it can leave a big impact on our productivity. And we're going to look at some of the strategies that we can use to overcome this. And really, if you're not Gen X, you're saying this episode is not for me. It actually is, because the issue comes down to change. As Gen Xers, we've seen a lot of change, particularly when it comes to technology. And you know, these changes have hit Gen X maybe harder than some of the other generations, because Xers have lived long enough in an analog age to remember the old ways, right, quote unquote. But we're also young enough to embrace new technology as it came out in the 80s, the 90s, and into the 2000s. But that has led to some challenges. And here's a story from my life to underscore what I mean. Tell me if you resonate with any of this, right? If any of this resonates with you. Music. I went from cassettes and CDs to then digital music on iTunes, and now to streaming on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, right? Now, I had records as a kid, but they weren't really pop music. It was more my parents' collection of classical and sort of Southern country gospel or something. I don't know. But so I did have records, but not really in my music collection. But there's so many shifts in how I consume music, and each transition has come with new learning curves, new storage techniques, right? Those big racks and storage cases for our tapes and CDs, to having to sync music on our iPod or iPhone or MP3 player, and now cloud storage and streaming. The same thing is true with photographs. I used to have photo albums and prints. Remember, shout out to anybody who would go get doubles, right? So you could share with your friends. Then I moved to online storage with programs like Flickr or Aperture. And now we have syncing services right on our phone with iCloud or Google Drive. And, I faced a real challenge up until a few months ago, because I had tens of thousands of pictures on an old MacBook Pro that were in Aperture. I'm talking baby pictures of my kids, pictures from when Susie and I were first married and dating. Basically, anything that happened before 2016 or 2017 that was a digital photo was in Aperture. It's a Mac-based program. It only lived on that one single MacBook Pro, and you can start to see why that was causing so much fear for us. What if that computer crashes? We would lose everything. Well, I finally took a couple of days off, literally from work, and got them off of the computer. They're still not in my iCloud drive, but they are backed up in a couple of different places. But that transfer process, it's all manual. It involves a lot of metadata cleanup if I want to be able to search and have access to those. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of time. But obviously, for pictures that are that important to us, it is worth it. Same thing, I could go on with videotapes. I had hundreds of mini DVDs. I used to do a lot of video production and editing, and I spent a lot of 2020 when we first started working from home. I had a deck set up to digitize all of that while I was working, and so I could at least have them on hard drives. Another area where this shows its head is in computer files. And again, if you are Gen X like me, you've probably gone from storing files on those 3.5-inch hard disks to thumb drives, to maybe multiple computer drives. Every time I changed jobs, I had to pull my personal files off my work computer. And those have just created a big, hot mess of files. Does this sound familiar to anyone out there? Anybody else raising your hand? Again, I know there could be some millennials and even boomers or whoever that are in the same boat. But for Gen Y and Gen Z, they've always lived in this world of the new, quote unquote, technology. And yes, there have been some changes, but it hasn't been these monumental shifts. And so their transitions haven't been as major as what we have gone through. It's just more of a refining technology, not completely rewriting it. So what does all of this have to do with productivity? It was a great fun trip down memory lane, right? But what does this have to do with productivity and our everyday life today? Well, every time there is a change, a major change like that in technology, we have to learn new ways of doing things. A change, even positive change, can slow down our productivity and cause us to lose out. My blog this week talks about this very thing, change and productivity. I'll put a link in the show notes so that you can read that if you want. As I said, I have lost a lot of time dealing with photos and music and files just in general. And I'm always looking for a better way of organizing things so that I'm more efficient and ultimately more productive. So imagine my excitement when I found the PARA method and the idea around something called a second brain by Tiago Forte. Now, by the way, I am fully aware of how revealing this episode is going to be as my inner geek comes out. Again, if you have listened to this show, I'm sure you are familiar with this, and I'm not worried about it. Okay. But you can find videos all over YouTube talking about para and second brain. And at its basic, it's a template or a foundation for organizing all of the information in your life, from your files to your web links to your digital notes. It works across all platforms, all systems, and it's very customizable. So let's break down what PARA stands for and how you would use it in organizing your digital life. So let's break down the PARA method real quickly, and then we'll come back and flesh it out a little bit more. Projects are short-term efforts that you're working on now. Areas are long-term responsibilities that you want to manage over time. Resources are topics or interests that may be useful in the future. And archives are inactive items from the other three categories. So even with that basic description, I think you can start to see the power of this system. But let's dig into this a little bit more. Projects. Think of these as goals with a specific end date or definition of what completion looks like. That might be launching a new product, training for a big race, renovating your kitchen, writing a proposal for work, or writing a book. These all have project qualities to them. They have a stop and start date. They are usually one-off, meaning you're only going to do them once, right? Or at least right now, you're only doing them once. It's not an ongoing thing. In the holistic productivity world, I would call these goals. And we have very clear roadmaps for how we do goals. Areas are important parts of your life that require ongoing attention. These are the responsibilities that we have to deal with in our work, in our personal life, in our purpose-driven life. Think social media. Think finances, either for work or at home. Managing a team, all the HR issues that come up with that. Your home, car, and medical things that happen that you want to keep track of. This is ongoing things that you're always going to need a place for storing them. Resources, these are topics that you are learning about or you are interested in learning about. And it may be things that you're not actively doing today, but you have an interest in. You want to learn about maybe doing that in the future. Maybe it's rock climbing. Maybe it's interior design or photography. Maybe you want to study up on coffee. I prefer drinking it, but maybe you want to study it and learn about it. These don't have to be things that you are currently into, like I said, but you might need or want this information in the future. And archives, again, just anything from the other three categories that is no longer active, but you want to save and hold on to for future reference. This is projects that could have been completed or already put on hold, areas that you're no longer involved in. Maybe you change jobs or something is no longer relevant. And resources that you have stopped researching, that you're no longer interested in, they've sort of run their course. As you can probably tell, there are a lot of benefits to the PARA system. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it provides easy access to your most important files in projects, areas, and resources, as well as the older files in archives, right? It's pretty simple to break down. It can also be used in multiple locations. It can be used for your files on your hard drive or your cloud server. It can be used for notes on your phone, bookmarks in your web browser, even physical files in a filing cabinet. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways and places that you can implement PARA. And the system is the same all over the place. So you know I'm looking for a project, whether I'm looking on my phone, in my notes, in the file folder, wherever it is. There are some things that are negative about it as well. I'm not sure what to do with resources for current projects or even areas. So if I'm researching something for the book that I'm writing, if I was writing a book, I'm not. It's not a leak, okay? But if I was writing a book, research that I'm writing for that, do I put that in resources, or do I put that in projects? Maybe articles on finance or marketing. That's something that's constantly ongoing. I think Tiago Forte would say they are still resources, but for me, I like having everything in one place. I don't want to think about it. So I might put those in a resource folder in my areas or in the project file itself. The beauty of this is it is customizable. You can do whatever works for you. So while it's sort of a negative to try to think of some of those things, I think it's easily solvable. Another downside is it is not easy to retrofit all of your existing files. Okay, if you had to go back and move everything into this sort of structure, it would be very, very time consuming. And you have to weigh that against, risk and reward, right? Is that beneficial use of your time? But it is very easy to start using the PARA framework and go forward. So that is, again, something that is very positive. Now, Forte talks about PARA in his book, Building a Second Brain. And I will put links to that in the show notes if you want to check that out. Now, he tells how he got started with PARA and building a second brain. It started when he had a chronic illness, and he had tons of files and documents related to this chronic illness and how the doctors were treating him. And he needed a way to capture the notes, but also to distill them and so that he could understand them. Later, when he was working in Silicon Valley as a consultant, he had tons of information, and he just needed to distill that down so he knew where all of that information was. He started talking about blogging and note taking and realized that all of this information was his second brain. And the more organized it was, the faster he could recall the information, pull it back up. His second brain allowed him to adapt more quickly, bounce back from failure, and produce value no matter what. To do this, he has a system that he calls CODE, CODE, for capturing data or information. This is the bigger picture than just PARA. It's the ultimate method for digital note-taking. He's consistently distilling the information down into bite-sized pieces. And this is what CODE stands for. It's capture, organize, distill, and express. Okay? And so when you talk about capturing, be selective in what you capture. It needs to be inspiring or useful or something that's personal or maybe even surprising. As you organize that information, this is where the PARA method comes into. We're going to organize it into projects, areas, resources, or archive. When we talk about distilling this information, this is a progressive method of summarization. Tiago Forte has a whole system of bolding and highlighting and underlining and creating summaries, which helps him get to the heart of information. And I will probably talk about code at some point in a future episode, but again, you can read about that in the book. You can probably Google it and find a lot of information about it as well. But it is a whole niche way of taking information and summarizing it down into the basic elements that you need to remember. And then express, using that information to help you remember, to help you connect back to the data, to help you create new things with the information. So that is how you express the information. Building a second brain using code and PARA is how Tiago Forte is able to have the most important information at his fingertips. And it really started what he calls a personal knowledge management system. While there were already digital note-taking software out there, he really ushered in a new wave of interest in the topic and a new way to look at it. Now, I am all for personal knowledge management, and I have tried a lot of different ways to keep things organized. As far as files go, I've had a pretty organized series of folders and subfolders and sub and sub folders for my computer files. But it was really only in that one area. It was just computer files. It wasn't everything else in my life. It was just things in my documents folder. And it was also organized by year, which makes sense in the moment. But now, when I'm looking for something that I did maybe in 2017 or 2018, it's harder to remember which year it was. So that makes it harder to find. Plus, I have a lot of different folders for finances for 2017, 2018, 2019, and so maybe putting all of that into a folder about finance makes a lot more sense. As you start to look online, you will find lots of information, like I said, about para, about second brain. It's all over the place right now. Second brain is almost a cottage industry in some ways, as people are making different templates for note-taking platforms, and you can buy those. We're also seeing it integrated natively into some platforms as well. So here's the million-dollar question for you and for me. Does a second brain actually make you more productive? I think the answer is yes. I think it does, but there are definitely some caveats. There are also some potholes and some traps that we can fall into here that come back to our old adversary of productivity, and that is change. So let's talk about how we can utilize a second brain type of mentality, the para system, the code, and not fall into some of those traps. I think we have to start by keeping it simple. That's the beauty of para, right? Is it's simplicity. It's one very simple system. It can apply to everything, but it can get complicated fast. Now, I will tell you that I went all in on a second brain platform for Notion after I read the book, and only to realize that there were some limitations to it, but also there was a huge amount of time that I spent setting up the template, customizing it to my specific needs. And ultimately, it was a major waste of time. Okay. Which leads me to my next point. Before you go and do all of that, understand your pain points before you dive into this type of second brain system. Look at the types of data that you're going to be storing and categorizing. Where does it live? How do you save it now? How do you retrieve it now? What do you need it to do for you? And I think a lot of this comes down to if you are taking a lot of digital notes, doing a lot of research, then yes, this can be a great way to do it. If it's just the files on your computer, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to change the system that you already have. So look at where you are in your personal knowledge management and see if this would be a good thing for you. Try to understand your pain points before you start to move forward. You also need to look at the software that you are going to use to help you do this if you're talking about notes and other types of data besides just files. Some software features are better than others. And like I said, some platforms have this built into it already. So looking at the software and doing some comparisons, again, there's a lot of great information on YouTube that talks about different note-taking platforms and how it works with para. So spend some time researching and doing that before you dive in to one platform and find out that it doesn't work for you. I would definitely recommend starting forward and not backward. Pick a date, maybe it's January 1st, and build your system out from that point forward. As you need some of your old files that were in your old system, move them into para at that point. This is going to save time at the beginning to get set up, to get everything going, and it allows you to tweak the system as you go without as much effort. Okay? So that is definitely a recommendation that I would have. I would also recommend that you don't just use it for your files. Again, look at what other data you can store in that para mindset, right? Contacts on your phone. We talked about bookmarks and links for your web browser. Tasks on your to-do list might fit into that para method as well. But ultimately, you have to do what's best for you. I am by no means an anti-second brain or anti-para person. I have definitely used it to improve my personal knowledge management, but I think you have to have a system that works for you and is something that you're going to actually use. And it may be something that you need to explain easily to an assistant or a family member. So it has to make sense in your life. I know that there are a lot of ways that you can get sidetracked that will be unproductive. And I definitely want to save you from some of that. So, again, I highly recommend the book. It is a great place to start understanding and unpacking this idea of personal knowledge management and how the ins and outs of para and code. I'll put a link for the book in the show notes. And as you go down this journey, this can help you really understand what you need to know, how you could structure your knowledge, your information, so that you can retrieve it easily, so that you can have it easily accessible, and you can use it to help you achieve your goals as you go forward. So that's it for the show today. I hope it is helpful. I hope if you haven't heard about para or second brain, this has piqued some sort of interest for you, and you can go out and check that out and hopefully build a system that works perfectly for you. But thank you for being here for this episode. Check out the show notes. You can find those at holisticproductivity.com/28. Again, I'll put links for Tiago Forte and Second Brain and all of that stuff right there. Make sure you are subscribed on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. If you want to watch the show, you can do that there. When you subscribe, when you follow to the show, you will be one of the first ones to get it when it drops on next Tuesday. And I know that that will be another great episode. We want to have you here for that. I would also love if you could rate the show on your favorite podcast platform. Give it a thumbs up, a 5 stars, whatever that looks like on your platform. If you do that, that would be fantastic and helps other people find the show as well. Be sure to follow Wholistic Productivity on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Substack, and YouTube. There's a lot of great productivity tips and motivation there. And I definitely want to invite you to join the Holistic Productivity community on School. We can have a lot of great conversations about para, about second brain, about all sorts of other things on that platform. So again, check the show notes and you will find the link to that as well. Thank you so much for listening in. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you are here, not for me, but for you. My goal is always to help you dream big, plan smart, and live fully. So thank you. We'll see you next time.